A group of men and women sit in a cramped, unlit room in a first-century city, listening to the rhythmic crunch of Roman boots on the cobblestones outside. Why hold on to an invisible savior in heaven when you can stand inside a visible temple on earth? Most people assume the book of Hebrews is a dense in the streets, and the specific temptation that nearly broke them in the first century is the exact same one that quietly destroys people today. You sit in the driver's seat of a parked car with the engine off, staring at the glow of a negative bank balance on your phone screen, or you sit in a sterile clinic, pressing your shoes against a cold linoleum floor, waiting for a doctor to walk through a wooden door with test results. When the pressure of life squeezes the breath out of your lungs, the invisible nature of faith suddenly feels maddening. The first-century believers wanted to go back to the temple because they could see the smoke, they could touch the stone, they could measure their standing with the divine by bringing a physical animal to a physical priest and watching a physical blade fall. It was transactional. It was predictable. It was safe. When your world is falling apart, you do not want an invisible high priest seated in a heavenly dimension. You want a guarantee you can hold in your hands. The temptation you face today is exactly the same. Even if the architecture looks different, when the silence of God feels too heavy, you instinctively look for a substitute temple. You look for a system where your input guarantees an output. Maybe you turn your career into an altar, burning 80-hour weeks because a paycheck is a visible, touchable metric of your worth. Theological textbook meant for seminary students to dissect. And it does carry that weight sometimes, filled with complex arguments about Melchizedek and Levitical covenants. Maybe you turn your theology into a rigid, impenetrable fortress, policing the boundaries of who is right and who is wrong, because intellectual certainty feels like safety. Maybe you try to manage your own sin through exhausting cycles of self-improvement, punishing yourself when you fail, trying to pay a debt that has already been cleared. You want a checklist. You want a shadow you can control. But the author of Hebrews is writing to tell you that returning to a system of performance is not a return to safety. It is a return to a cage. The tragedy of regression is not that you stop believing. It is that you settle for a shadow when you have been handed the substance. You cannot go back to the old temple. You cannot go back to the old way of relating to God through fear, frantic effort, and constant sacrifice. You cannot reconstruct a system that God Himself has already dismantled. Because the author knows something about that ancient temple in Jerusalem, he knows what happened to its holiest, most terrifying, most impenetrable barrier, the exact moment the Roman spikes went through the wrists of Jesus, to stop you from looking backward. He forces you to look at a very specific piece of ancient fabric, but if you look closer at the urgency pulsing beneath the ink, at the specific way the arguments are constructed, you start to see something. The 10th day of the 7th month arrives. The high priest strips off his golden robes. He washes his body in water. He puts on plain white linen. He takes a golden censer full of burning coals. He takes a bowl of warm animal blood. He walks into the holy place. He stops before a massive curtain. The veil. It is thick. It is woven of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. It is embroidered with cherubim. It is a physical, terrifying barrier between human failure and divine fire. He pulls it aside. He steps into the dark room. He sprinkles the blood on the gold lid. He does not linger. He backs out, hoping he survives the encounter. No one else can enter. No one else can look. The access is restricted. The fear is constant. The system is closed. That is the shadow. Now look at the substance. Outside the city gates, a carpenter hangs on a Roman cross. The sky turns black in the middle of the day. He pushes up on the iron spikes. He gasps for his final breath. He lowers his head. And a few miles away, inside the massive stone temple, the ground violently trembles. The veil tears, not from the bottom up, as if a man had pulled it apart. From the top down, ripped in two by invisible hands, the heavy fabric falls open. The dark room is flooded with light. The holiest place on earth is exposed. The textbook reading completely misses. Hebrews is not a theological manual. It is a rescue operation. The anonymous author of this letter is watching his friends. To the common dirt. The author of Hebrews looks at his exhausted friends and points directly to this torn curtain. In chapter 10, he tells them exactly what happened. We have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus. We have a new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain. The torn veil is not a structural failure. It is an open invitation. The old high priest entered once a year with the blood of a goat. Jesus enters once for all eternity with his own blood. The old priest stood up in the Holy of Holies because his work was never done. Jesus sat down at the right hand of the throne because the debt is fully paid. You do not need a stone temple anymore. You do not need a Levitical priest. You do not need the daily, exhausting machinery of endless sacrifice, because you have the Cretan priest. He has already walked through the curtain. He has already cleansed the sanctuary. He has already tied a rope around his people and anchored them to the throne room of God itself. And that anchor is the only thing that will keep them from drifting away. When a storm hits, a ship does not sink immediately. Usually, it just slowly, silently drifts. Stand on the edge of a cliff. He sees them turning their heads. Looking back at the safety of the temple system, he knows they are about. If you have ever been on open water when the engine cuts out and the wind picks up, you know the feeling. The salt spray stings your eyes. The dark water rises and falls with a nauseating, relentless rhythm. You grab the heavy wooden oars, pulling against the current until the muscles in your shoulders burn and your palms blister. But you are losing ground. You are slipping past the safe harbor, pulled backward into the freezing. Chaotic, deep. That is exactly how the author of Hebrews describes the spiritual crisis of his friends. In chapter 2, he warns them that they must pay closer attention to what they have heard, lest they drift away from it. They are not running away from Jesus in open rebellion. They are simply exhausted. They are tired of rowing against the crushing current of the Roman Empire and the Jewish establishment. And when you are that tired, trying harder is not the solution. If you are in a season where your spiritual life feels like you are sitting in a boat with no engine, gripping oars, you no longer have the strength to pull. The author of Hebrews does not command you to row faster. He does not tell you to muster up more, to step backward into a shadow, trading the reality they found for the replica they left behind. He does not yell at them. He does not threaten. Emotional willpower. He points to what is holding the ship. In chapter 6, he writes that we have a hope that is a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf. An anchor is completely useless if you keep it inside the boat. To save the ship, the heavy iron must be thrown over the edge into the dark water, disappearing from sight, plunging until it catches on. The immovable bedrock at the bottom of the sea. You cannot see the anchor, but you can feel the heavy rope pull, taut. You can feel the massive weight of the ship snap into alignment and hold its ground against the rushing tide. Faith is not a fragile, emotional wish you conjure up in the dark. It is a heavy iron chain tethered to a high priest who has already conquered death. Your anchor is not hooked to a temporary, earthly temple that the Romans will burn to the ground in a few short years. Your anchor is thrown upward. It goes straight through the torn veil, past the angels, past Moses, and it catches securely on the solid, eternal throne of the Creator of the universe. You do not have them with hellfire. Instead, he does something brilliant. He takes every single pillar of their ancient faith, the angels, the prophets, Moses himself, the priesthood, the temple sacrifices, and to hold on to God. He is holding on to you when you stop trying to row backward to a fading religion, and finally, let the reality of that invisible tether take the weight of your life. It changes how you see every single thing this ancient writer was trying to prove. The ink dries on the parchment in that cramped, first-century room. A man rolls up the scroll, hands it to a courier, and sends it out into the cold, terrifying dark of the Roman Empire. He does not send swords or shields to protect his friends. He sends 13 uses of a single Greek adjective. The angels carried messages of fire, and the Son sat down on the throne. Moses brought the law down a smoking mountain, and the architect built a house that cannot fall. The earthly priests slaughtered bulls on a bronze altar, and the true priest offered his own blood once for all. The blood of Abel cried out for vengeance from the dirt, and the blood of Jesus cried out for mercy from the cross. The heavy veil blocked the way to the Holy of Holies, and invisible hands ripped it from the top down. He begins dismantling them one by one, not by saying they are bad, but by building a rhetorical engine around a single, highly specific Greek word. The exhausted believers stared at an empty sea and a heavy iron anchor caught on the bedrock of heaven. An old, fading religion demanded endless performance, and a single word declared it was finished forever. 13 times. One word, a better reality. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the sheer surgical precision of that word. Kraton. Not just that it means superior, or prevailing, or stronger, but that the author does not use it to win a theological debate in a vacuum. He uses it to build a floor under a group of people who are shivering in an unlit room, watching their businesses fail and their families walk away. He takes the heavy iron hammer of that one adjective and he shatters their nostalgia. Not to punish them, but to prove to them that they are holding the substance. If you are in a season where the pressure is squeezing the breath out of your lungs, where the silence of God feels too heavy, and you are tempted to row backward to whatever predictable, transactional system makes you feel safe, the book of Hebrews is a place to drop anchor. You do not have to earn the Holy of Holies. You do not have to perform your way into peace. The work is already done. If this opens something up for you, subscribe and leave a comment. A word he drops into the text exactly 13 times. To find the answer, you have to understand what was actually at stake. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to earn their way to God. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, and may the God who tore the heavy veil from the top down meet you in your drifting and anchor your soul to a reality that can never be shaken. The place to start is not with the word itself, but with the terrifying, beautiful architecture of the religion they were so desperate to go back to. They are exhausted. The evening air is biting, and the stone walls are damp. If they crack the wooden shutters, they can almost smell the thick, heavy smoke. To understand the pull of the past, you have to measure its weight. The first-century Jewish world was anchored to a massive, beating heart made of white limestone and gold. The temple in Jerusalem was not a building you visited once a week for a polite service. It was a sensory overload of divine access. If you stood in the courts of Herod's masterpiece, your senses were assaulted by the physical reality of your religion. You heard the deafening bleat of thousands of Passover lambs, the chanting of Levite choirs echoing off 50-foot stone walls, the sharp ringing of silver, shekels hitting the collection chests. You smelled the thick, sweet, acrid smoke of roasting meat and imported incense. You saw the blood. It was a system designed to be seen, touched, and felt. For centuries, this intricate machinery of priests, altars, and veils was the only authorized way to interact with the creator of the universe. When you sinned, you didn't just pray a silent, abstract prayer in your bedroom. You walked a physical animal up the stone steps. You laid your physical hands on its head, transferring your guilt. You watched the bronze blade fall, and you felt the heat of the fire that consumed your substitute. The temple was not a religious preference. It was the architectural proof of their identity. Now, consider what the early followers of Jesus were asking these people to accept. They had no buildings. They had no polished choirs of frankincense and burning fat drifting from a massive temple system in the distance. a temple they used to call home. They had no gold-threaded robes or smoking altars. They met secretly in cramped, unlit dining rooms, breaking ordinary bread and drinking ordinary wine. They claimed that the ultimate sacrifice had already happened outside the city gates, on a splintered Roman cross. They claimed that their high priest was currently sitting in a heavenly throne room that nobody could visibly see. When life is peaceful, an invisible faith is easy to maintain. But when the Roman Empire starts stripping your rights, when your family publicly shames you in the marketplace, the human mind craves the tangible. The persecuted Jewish believers receiving this letter were not doubting whether Jesus existed. They were suffering from profound exhaustion. They were wondering if the invisible reality was worth the visible. Daily loss. They wanted a sanctuary they could touch. They wanted the shadow back. So the author of Hebrews realizes that simply telling them to stand firm will not work. He has to dismantle the very foundation of their nostalgia. He has to prove that going back to the old system is not a return to safety. It is a return to a lesser world. And to do that, he begins his argument, not at the earthly altar, but at the very top of the celestial hierarchy. A voice speaks from a burning bush. A sea splits in two. A mountain catches fire. This is how the story always started. And they are holding a letter. They are not deciding what to believe. They are deciding whether to survive. For years, they have followed the way. For the exhausted believers holding this letter, their history is built on giants. God speaks to the prophets. A vision in a valley of dry bones. A burning coal pressed against a trembling lip. A whisper in the mouth of a dark cave. God dispatches the angels. The sky tears open. The flaming swords flash. The law is handed down through terrifying, blazing messengers that make men fall flat on their faces in the desert dirt. God calls Moses. The man climbs the jagged rock of Sinai. He breathes the thick, suffocating smoke. He carries the heavy granite tablets down to a terrified camp. God establishes the priesthood. Aaron puts on the sacred garments. The heavy gemstones rest on his chest. The golden bells chime on the hem of his robe. The blood spills on the bronze altar. Day after day, year after year, a never-ending cycle of slaughter and smoke, because the work of a human priest is never truly finished. These are the untouchable pillars of the Jewish faith. The prophets, the angels, Moses, the priests. If a writer wants to pull a Hebrew believer back from the edge of the temple courts, he has to deal with the titans. He has to take the holiest icons of their worldview and prove that going back to them is a fatal mistake. The author lines them up. He looks at the angels. He writes a single, devastating question. To which of the angels did God ever say, "Sit at my right hand"? Of a crucified carpenter. They walked away from the ancient, time-tested traditions of their fathers. But now, the pressure is becoming unbearable. Their businesses are being boycotted. Angels are messengers. Jesus is the king. Angels stand at attention in the heavenly court. Jesus sits on the throne. Angels are made of wind and fire. Jesus is the one who spoke the wind and the fire into existence. Then he looks at Moses, the ultimate hero, the lawgiver. He writes, Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses. Just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself, Moses is a faithful servant inside the house. Jesus is the architect who drew the blueprints. Moses delivers the law. Jesus fulfills it. Then he looks at the high priests. The earthly priests stand daily in the temple, offering the same blood that can never actually clear a human conscience. Jesus offers one sacrifice for all time, and then he sits down. The earthly priests grow old, DSI, and have to be replaced. Jesus lives forever. He is not insulting the ancient heroes. He is exposing their limitations. They were never meant to be the destination. They were the signposts pointing down the road. They were the shadow cast by the massive, blinding reality of the Son of God. But to make this stick, to make these exhausted men and women drop their nostalgia and hold the line, the author needs a weapon. He needs a single, undeniable concept that will shatter the illusion of the old system. Their families have publicly disowned them, sitting Shiva for them as if they were already dead. The Roman authorities are watching. The local elite are tightening the grip, once and for all. He reaches for one specific Greek adjective. He drops it into chapter 1. He hammers it into chapter 7. He repeats it in chapters 8, 9, 10, 10d, 11, and 12. He uses it exactly 13 times. Open the parchment to the very first chapter, verse 4. The author has just finished describing how the universe was spoken into existence, how the Son is the exact imprint of the divine nature. He looks at this exhausted, persecuted audience, and he makes a definitive statement about where Jesus stands in the celestial hierarchy. He writes that the Son became so much superior to the angels. The word translated superior or better in your English Bible is the Greek adjective kriton. It appears 13 times in the book of Hebrews, functioning like a mathematical constant in a complex equation. The noun form, kratos, does not just mean something is nicer, or more preferable, or slightly upgraded. Its root carries the weight of power, dominion, and prevailing strength. It means it is robust enough to overpower and replace what came before it. If tracing these ancient words is unraveling old assumptions for you, you're exactly who this channel is for. Subscribe and leave a thought in the comments, because every week we dig into the text until the bedrock shows. And the old religion is right there. It is safe. It is legal. It is magnificent. It has towering cedar doors wrapped in gold. So the author takes this word kriton and wields it like a heavy iron hammer against the temple stones. He methodically moves through their religious framework and strikes every single piece of it with this one Greek word. In chapter 7, he writes that the old law made nothing perfect, but Jesus introduces a Cretan hope. In chapter 8, he declares that Jesus mediates a Cretan covenant, which is enacted on Cretan promises. The earthly priests stood barefoot on cold stone floors offering the warm blood of bulls and goats. But in chapter 9, the author insists that heavenly things require Cretan sacrifices. When these believers were watching their property get confiscated by the Roman authorities, the author reminds them in chapter 10 that they possess a Cretan possession, one that cannot be seized or burned. That root changes everything. When you see the sheer volume of this word pounding rhythmically through the chapters, you realize the author is not offering a polite comparison between two equal options. Cretan is not a suggestion of improvement. It is a declaration of obsolescence. He is telling them that going back to the temple is not a return to safety, it is a return to a fragile, fading, inferior shadow. It has a high priest dressed in fine linen and precious stones. It has a daily, visible rhythm of sacrifices where you can watch the blood that has already been superseded by the substance. He builds this overwhelming case for the better covenant, the better promises, the better priest. But the most staggering use of this word does not happen in a theological argument about angels or ancient laws. It happens when he compares the blood of Jesus to a 4,000-year-old murder scene. Two brothers walk into an open field. The sun beats down on the dirt. A heavy stone is lifted. A skull is fractured. Only one brother walks out. The damp earth opens its mouth and drinks the first human blood ever spilled. God finds the murderer wandering in the dust. He does not ask for an explanation. He states a terrifying reality. The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Blood has a voice, and the blood of Abel is screaming for justice. It is demanding retribution. It is crying out from the soil. A life for a life. Make him pay. Do not let him get away with this. That is the voice of the old world. A world governed by exact scales. Thousands of years later, outside the city gates of Jerusalem, another innocent man is murdered by his brothers. The heavy iron spikes are driven through human bone. A Roman spear. Hit the bronze altar and know exactly where you stand with God. It is pulling them back like a gravitational force. Pierces aside. The dark red blood runs down the splintered wood and hits the dry dust of Golgotha. This blood also has a voice. But the author of Hebrews reaches the absolute climax of his letter in chapter 12, verse 24. When he tells these exhausted Christians exactly what that blood is saying. He writes that we have come to the sprinkled blood that speaks, a better word than the blood of Abel, a kraton word. Abel's blood cries out for condemnation. Jesus' blood cries out for mercy. Abel's blood says, "He is guilty." Jesus' blood says, "It is finished." Abel's blood demands that the killer be cursed, to wander the earth. Jesus' blood demands that the wanderer be brought all the way home. The blood on the cross is not an indictment. It is an acquittal. The voice of the new covenant does not speak a word of vengeance. It speaks a word of total, prevailing, world-altering forgiveness, a kraton reality that outspeaks every failure, every sin, and every accusation the enemy can level against you. The Hebrew believers reading this parchment in their unlit room knew the theology. They knew the substance was infinitely better than the shadow. But perfect theology does not stop a Roman centurion from confiscating your shop. It does not stop your mother from ignoring you.